Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
With the second pick in the 2011 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Von Miller, linebacker, Texas A&M.
He's the greatest ever, huh?
And then I just wanted
When you got all the advantages, it's easy.
Welcome to the Aggie War Pod, a product of the Republic of Football Podcast Network and Dave Campbell's Texas Football. I am your co-host, Mike Craven, senior writer at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. The other voice you'll hear on this podcast is a barbecue eating machine who won't shy away from a road trip or an off-key rendition of Creed. The former Fighting Texas Aggie defensive lineman arrived in College Station as a three-star prospect back in 2013. He now resides in Houston, but his heart never left. Ladies, gentlemen, reveille, I present the one, the only, the engaged, Jay Arnold. Jay, how's it going?
Yeah, speaking of not shying away from road trips, right? Just closed off one right before college football season. And as you mentioned, I am now an engaged man. So it was a fantastic road trip, fantastic vacation, fantastic weather. For all this before we get into what I'm sure is going to be a busy college football season.
Yeah, Jay, like a true friend, sent me a text message of the temperature that he was experiencing on like Tuesday or Wednesday. Real asshole behavior, but I respect it. I would have done the exact same thing. Golfed at Angel Fire, then got engaged. Okay, so I got engaged in March of this year. No, March. I think that's correct. Sorry. It's been a long, magazine season, all that kind of stuff. It blends in there. I think March. I had a game plan going in. I wanted to ask at the very beginning of the trip. I asked, it was a 5-day trip. I asked on day one. That way I was on cruise control the rest of the 5 days. Like she couldn't get mad at me. I had earned all my points, right? Like we were going to have the best vacation ever if it happened day one. Did you have a game plan? What was your kind of strategy going into how you were going to do this on engagement vacation trip?
So I did it the opposite. I waited until the very last day of the trip, and we had one more night at the hotel, and then we were on the road back home. That way, I would find out. I wasn't going to let it ruin like the beginning stages of the trip, but I would find out that way in case. I was pretty confident she was going to say yes, but if she did say no, that I would be able to divert the road trip home and maybe drop her off at an airport. But thankfully that was avoided. She said yes. And we got a great view out of the spot. And it's a place that's real special to me in Red River, New Mexico. And now hopefully it'll be really special for her too.
Yeah, way to solidify your ability to return to that spot over the rest of your life. That was very smart. I just now realized that that's what you did there on the location deal. Like, hey, we got to go back. I mean, that's where we got engaged. It's going to be a big important thing. So that was solid. So congratulations to you again. I would like to point out your time management, not great. You got 12 months out of the year. 4 months of those are college football season, and you decided, let's try to jam everything we can into the month of August. How's that going for you?
Yeah. So it really started like 3 weeks ago with the road trip to Richmond. Right. And that was, a 3,000-mile trip. And then I decided to plan this vacation for us. Another about 3,000 miles probably covered between all of the stuff that we did and all the sites we saw. But yeah, time management. Right. I'm doing all this. And then the part that we haven't mentioned yet is I pick up the keys for my new apartment later today.
Yeah.
So
crazy person, but sicko behavior.
Yeah. And honestly, the worst part of all this time management is deciding that I was going to move in August. For those of you unfamiliar with Houston weather in August, not fun.
Yeah. Houston weather most months out of the year. Yeah. Not fun with that humidity.
And that way you're getting a little bit of revenge for me sending that text to you. So I did get to experience, like temperatures in the 50s in Colorado and New Mexico last week, but I'm going to pay for it dearly by moving furniture in August.
I mean, it's hot, man. It's hot. I don't know. I'm not going to get into a global warming discussion with anybody, but I've been doing ranch work for 38 years of my life, and this is brutal, man. Like it is hot. There is no water out there. Growing hay costs like $1 million because all the water you got to spend to grow it. The cows don't even walk around. They just like hang out under like a tree for like 15 hours out of the day. It's pretty insane. There's just no respite for it. So I'm glad you were able to get away from it a little bit. Hopefully it breaks for us relatively soon. I feel like every single day I open up my weather app, like in the morning, it's become one of my habits just to see if that next last day will like finally say 92. I'll be like, okay, we just got to make it to there. And every single time I do that, the next day is just 104. Yeah. Like I think we just live at 104 now in Central Texas. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, that's the other side. I got to see rain while I was up in the mountains.
Oh my God,
water! I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's been since June here in Austin, since it's rain. I mean, it's wild, man. Absolutely wild. The fall can't come here quick enough. That is for sure.
Yeah, normally it's going up to the mountains and seeing what the fire danger is. This time it was coming back and seeing wildfire warning signs, basically from like Vernon down to Houston. It was just fire warning signs all along the way.
Well, that was a wildfire for the Texas Aggies in 2022. They're hoping it's a little bit better in 2023, and that's what this podcast is going to be about. We're going to talk about the 2023 season. For new listeners, we separate it into 4 downs, kind of like a football game. We'll break it into 4 different topics. We'll do offense and first down, defense and second down. We'll kind of just look at the schedule and overall season and third down. And then fourth down, we're going to talk about just Jay and I's plans for the college football season, where you can find us and what we're going to be up to. Before we get going, please rate, 5-star, subscribe, download, all that stuff. Tell a friend. That's how we grow this podcast. We're having a lot of fun doing it. We hope you're having a lot of fun listening to it. Promo code WHOOP at Home Field Apparel, WHOOP. You can get 15% off your first order. They're going to have some stuff coming out this week that's supposed to be pretty cool. I know TCU, Baylor are going to get their own. A&M had a release not too long ago. I mean, this summer for sure. So go ahead and look at Home Field Apparel. Get you some T-shirts. Get you some merch before the season starts. Some cool stuff there. Let's jump it off, Jay. First down, offensive breakdown. Obviously the big story of the offseason was Bobby Petrino getting hired as offensive coordinator, who's going to call plays, what it's going to look like. Scale of 1 to 10. 10 being Bobby has complete autonomy. How much do you think this is Bobby P's offense going into 2023?
I'm going to put it as an 8.
I like it. That's good.
I think he has most of the autonomy, but I'm like you with, I think we've said this ad nauseum on the podcast. Let's see what happens when it's a close game late and Jimbo gets a little bit itchy on the trigger finger with, kind of a late game offensive plan. I think Bobby Petrino is going to have the control, but I want to see what happens when there's a little bit of duress before I give him the full 10.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as well. I mean, I've joked about this on this podcast before, but you'd sit in the press box and laugh at Gary Patterson because he'd come out in the second half with a different colored shirt on, and you're like, oh, Gary P's taking over play call. Like he's going to be the man now again because he doesn't like the way the defense is playing. You just kind of wonder what the Jimbo Bobby relationship is going to be like, when the arrows start flying and it's 20-17 in the fourth quarter. But that's probably true for most head coaches and offensive coordinators. You get a lot more autonomy when you're up 20 points or, early in the game. A lot of head coaches are probably in their OC's ear, especially late in games. So we'll see how that dynamic works out. But for me, it's more about their personalities, and maybe I'm overrating that, but they're just both kind of fiery guys. And so it's going to look weird optically occasionally on the sideline. And Jimbo just has to be prepared to answer those questions, and the fan base is going to have to get used to just watching those two maybe yell at each other on occasion, because that's just how they operate. But my opinion is, and I don't know if this is a hot take or not, I am not as worried about the Texas A&M defense or offense as I am about the defense, and we'll talk about that in the second down. I think that for the offense, as long as they have some identity, they do some new stuff, kind of gussy it up a little bit. The talent is there for this to be the bounce back breakout group of the 2023 college football season.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I do think I'm a little more worried about the offense just because there are some key pieces that I still have questions about. and if they're going to take steps forward. I think the talent, no doubt, right? The talent's no doubt that this should be a better group, and they should improve on last year. But I still have some questions about one position group and one position in particular.
Well, let's talk about it. What is the thing that keeps Jay Arnold from being all in on the Texas Aggie offense right now?
Right now, it's the offensive line and then quarterback. So with the offensive line, I think they need to take a big step forward. And again, the talent is there to do so. Last year, they weren't healthy at all. You get a little bit healthier this year, and you get a little more of that continuity. And I think the offensive line takes a huge step forward. But we have to see that before I'm confident that the offense as a whole will take a step forward. Obviously, I mean, you look at Bryce Foster missing a ton of games last year, and when you lose your center, I think that's a huge blow. So we'll see what happens as far as that this year. If guys are able to stay healthy, if they are, I think that's primed for a fantastic year from the offense because the skill positions are incredible. But I mean, we've already seen a guy that I think was going to be a very key player in this offense go down with injury, right? I mean, that just we're talking about Donovan Green. It just shows you how fragile things can be as far as what you're looking at going into the season and how things will shake out. And then the flip side of that, again, the other side that I mentioned is quarterback play. Obviously, Connor Weigman closed out the season fantastically, but he's a true freshman. I think there's still a lot of questions about how much he can take over a game. And I think a lot of today's game depends on quarterbacks being able to do that. So he has the weapons around him. We'll see. We'll see if he can capitalize on that.
He doesn't need to be Johnny Manziel.
No.
And I think that's an important factor. Like, he doesn't need to walk in there and be Bryce Young. He doesn't need to win a Heisman. He doesn't need to be the best player on the football field. He just can't be the impediment to winning. He can't make you go backwards. And one thing we did see from Connor last year that to me will translate to another year, he didn't turn the ball over. There was times where he probably could have taken some more chances and pushed the ball down the field and taken some risks. And, maybe I've talked to some offensive coordinators that have told me, you media nerds look at interceptions wrong. Sometimes that number lies and we want them to take those shots, and low interception rates mean that the quarterback's not really pushing down the field. It's check down Charlie stuff. But I think Wegman's going to take a step forward. Bobby's offense is usually pretty quarterback friendly. It's going to be simpler, if not anything. I know that about the offense this year. It is going to be easier on the quarterback than it has under Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. But I agree with you about the offensive line, and I think we can narrow it down even further than that. And I believe you agree with me that guard to guard, Texas A&M should be fine if they're healthy. As long as Bryce Foster's healthy and stuff. And all of these conversations kind of depend on if they're healthy, right? Like, I mean, anything, health. Yeah,
it's definitely me hedging there a little bit.
Right. You gotta. I almost kind of look at this stuff like you have to presume health and just like that, and if it breaks down and, we talk about UTSA being a favorite or something. Frank Harris gets hurt, they're 6-6 or something, so it's all about staying healthy. But if Bryce Foster is back and is healthy and had a good offseason, as I've heard that he did, I think guard to guard A&M is really good. It's just those tackle spots. And if they can really handle the elite edge rushers they're going to see across the SEC at the tackle position.
Yeah, and while I think the health on the interior of the line is important, I think the ability to get better at the tackle position is more important, right? Like, even when healthy, the tackle position struggled last year. Trajan should take a step forward. Fathery, if he's healthy, should take a step forward. And then, I mean, there's guys waiting in the wings, right? Like Basantas, who's apparently been pretty good in camp.
Does that worry you that they're talking so much about a freshman offensive tackle? Because sometimes I see this as like, is he playing really well behind the scenes, or is Jimbo talking him up because he knows he's going to have to put him out there pretty early and he wants the fan base to understand that it's because he's playing really well, not because the other guys haven't taken that step? Am I looking too far into that, or does that worry you a little bit?
I mean, anytime a true freshman is in the too deep of an offensive line, it's worrisome.
Yeah,
in my opinion, just because of the physicality of the position and being able to adjust to the speed of the game. With that being said, obviously Basantis came in the spring. That helps a little bit. It does help a little bit, but I still would not prefer to have a true freshman in the two deep at the offensive tackle position. With that being said, if he's good enough, he's good enough, right? Like, you know, you're going to play your best guys. And if a true freshman rises to the occasion and is an immediate impact player, by all means, play him. I just think that when you see a true freshman in the two deep of an offensive line in the SEC, it's more of a red flag about depth than it is a positive sign. But again, I could very much be wrong.
There are times where we talk about this Texas A&M team at a few spots, and you go, well, I thought they'd been recruiting really well. You know what I mean? There shouldn't be, the way that they've recruited the last couple of years, there shouldn't be a spot as important as offensive tackle where a true freshman can come in and immediately be that good.
Right.
That's like a year 2, year 3 problem with the coach. It shouldn't be a year 5 problem with the coach, and it shouldn't be one after you've signed such highly rated recruiting classes over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's like
linebacker is another spot I think that way.
Linebacker and offensive line, they both just seem thin. And I feel better about the depth at offensive line, honestly, because you do have a lot of guys on the interior that are really, really talented. I mean, Cam Dewberry, who's a young guy, Mark Naboo, who played a lot. But you can also tell that they're worried about the depth of the offensive line because in the recruiting, and we don't have to get into all the recruiting, but in this recruiting class for 2024, there's already a high, like a push for offensive line. I think they've already got 5 guys committed, and they're still pushing to get more. So I think they can see that there's a little bit of a depth issue as well, as far as guys going to be leaving after this year and who's going to step up and fill those places.
Yeah, I mean, A&M's won that defensive line recruiting head-to-head battle with Texas a lot. DJ Hicks, a lot of those kind of guys. Texas has kind of won that offensive line battle. And you can see the pendulum kind of swing. I mean, Kelvin Banks, those kind of guys, DJ Campbell, those kind of guys. And so, I've always been interested in how A&M and Texas can be good at the same time. For most of the history I've ever looked up, and for most of my life, it always seemed like one was good when the other one was bad. And now that A&M and Texas go into the SEC, how will that recruiting work? And can both offensive lines be really good at the same time? Is there enough talent within the state and the country to do that? I think that's going to be a fun battle to watch. But yeah, I mean, anytime a true freshman's getting talked about, that much at tackle, that's a little worrisome for sure. But we just talked about Texas. Kelvin Banks started all games last year for Texas and probably the best offensive line in the state. So maybe the kid's just that good to where you can't keep him off the field. That's the glass half full view, is that he's just so damn good you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and again, Fathery has been banged up in fall camp, and I mean, he got an injury there at the very end of spring, which hampered his ability to come back. So part of Basantas being talked about too is, maybe Jimbo does ease Fathery back into the game. Maybe you don't see him take the full load against New Mexico early in the season, right? So there's a lot of factors that could go into it, but again, it's part of what makes me reticent about this offense is because we have still some questions about the offensive line.
How big is the Donovan Green loss?
I think it's pretty big because I think he's an incredible playmaker, but at the same time, I think that this tight end room at A&M has a lot of depth. Right. I think Jake Johnson's going to be a factor. He was going to be a factor even if Donovan Green was healthy. Now it's kind of just his turn to take over that tight end position. You have Max Wright, who's, the senior leader in the group, and I think we'll keep everything together. I mean, you have the big Swede and Theo Melanostrom, right? Like we haven't talked about him a lot, but he got some playtime last year. And as raw as he is, like he still has a lot of physical abilities. And I mean, Fernando Garza too, like, he had some pretty good plays there in the spring game. So it's going to be a loss, but I think with Jake Johnson and everybody else in that tight end room, I don't know if it's as worrisome as if somebody in the starting offensive line group went down.
Yeah, I mean, you never want to lose a starting player of that nature. And you're definitely an all-conference type player. And, for the player, you never want to see somebody get injured. But if you're going to lose a guy, tight end seemed like a spot you could lose a guy, maybe wide receiver, maybe tight end. On the offensive side of the ball, there's so many weapons there for A&M. One guy shouldn't be able to dictate how well they do offensively. We've talked a lot about the skill position player. I don't know if there's much need to talk about the wide receivers and what they can do. I mean, Evan Stewart, Anais Smith, Moose Muhammad, Noah Thomas. Like we can just go on and down the list. They're going to be loaded there. They're going to be one of the better units there in the country. Before we move to defense, let's talk running back for just a second. Like, I don't know if it even matters, right? If like who starts and who ends up being do you think this is a committee deal the whole time, or do you believe that one of these guys ends up becoming kind of the dude, by the second half of the season?
I think it'll be committee early, and I think Ruben Owens ends up being the guy by the second half of the season. And that's kind of just, I was reticent to talk about Ruben Owens, just again, true freshman. But I look at what he's done both in the spring and now in fall camp, and it just seems like everybody's just kind of blown away by his mix of athleticism, and also he's a natural pass catcher, right? Which is not something that a lot of guys have as a freshman coming out as a running back. So the fact that he's already going to be a factor in that side of the game, and the fact that he has a little bit of everything, a little bit of shiftiness, a little bit of power, makes me think that he's going to be a star pretty quickly. And while I think that it's going to be a committee to start out the year, I think by the back half of it, you'll see Ruben Owens take over a lot of touches.
I agree. Petrino in his one press conference as an Aggie talked about FTS, feed the studs. And if you're trying to get your best 5 skill position players on the field, Ruben Owens is going to be one of those guys. Like in space, he's just going to be one of your 2 or 3 best players with the ball in his hands. You have to figure out a way for him to get 10 touches, like at least, right? And so I think that number may grow by the second half of the year. But honestly, I think running back's going to be fine. Maybe you disagree with it. I've always felt like running back's more of a function of the offensive line. Like the running game's more a function of the offensive line than the running back. Give me really good offensive line, solid running back over really good running back, solid offensive line. So again, the ability to run the ball and stay balanced for A&M to me becomes an offensive line question more than is running back question, because I think all 3 of those guys can tote the rock enough to be successful.
Yeah, and A&M did have success running the ball last year, but I think it was more in spite of the offensive line. And because of Devon Achane, than it was because of the offensive line succeeding in the run block. And I will say too that I think run blocking is easier for offensive line than pass blocking is. But A&M needs to improve on both sides of that for the offensive line, right? Protecting the passer and opening up holes for the running back. Like you said, if the offensive line is playing well in the run game, then you can be interchangeable there as long as guys aren't giving the ball away. So we'll see what happens. Again, I expect the offensive line to take a step up and make it so that all 3 of the running backs that we've talked about can have success. But I'll still stick to my guns and say that I think Ruben Owens can be one of those guys that transcends offensive line play by the end of his career and be a guy that even if the guys in front of him aren't blocking well, he can make up for some of those mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, that may be why he's the best running back for the job for this. And, it's like when you pick a quarterback that can scramble a little bit because your offensive line, maybe not hold up. Owens is one of those guys that can do more with less. He's called the Black Unicorn for a reason. I love that nickname. We were really hoping at Dave Campbell's that he would have been on like the recruiting magazine cover one time just to use that headline, but we went with DJ Hicks just because he was the top player in the state. And El Campo didn't have a huge year. Owens' senior year, so we had to go the other way. But Black Unicorn would have been tremendous headline on Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine cover. That would have been nice. That would have been nice. That kid is really, really good. Excited to see him. Probably one of the top 5 true freshmen I'm most excited to see in the state is Ruben Owens at A&M. For second down, let's turn it over to the defensive side of the ball, God side of the ball, as we like to call it here on the Aggie War podcast. Jay, let's start with your bread and butter, cornerback play. No, I'm joking. Defensive line play. The Aggies on paper, I mean, find me a better defensive line in the country than Texas A&M. Are there any concerns that you have? Let's start with the negatives first. Like, what are some things that like up front you go, this needs to happen, or this may be a concern that we're not talking about enough?
Yeah. So last year, obviously, A&M was atrocious against the run. I think a lot of that was youth. Some of that was lack of health again, where you're rotating guys in that maybe a little bit before they're ready. But it sure seems like A&M should be better in that aspect of the game, which brings me to the other concern: sacks and rushing the passer, which A&M struggled with last year. As bad as they were at defending against the rush, they also struggled to sack opposing quarterbacks and gave up, in my opinion, a lot of lengthy scrambles when they could have had sacks and could have kept quarterbacks in the backfield for loss. That hurt the defense quite a bit and made the defense stay out on the field. Obviously, against the pass, A&M was good last year, but again, I think part of that is because teams knew they were going to have success running the ball, and even if they called it as designed pass, they were still able to run with the quarterback escaping the pocket. So what I'm looking at is discipline from the defensive line. I'm looking at staying in your gap in run plays and then staying in your rushing lanes against the pass when you're trying to get to the quarterback. Because again, I didn't see A&M get blown off the ball last year. Even with young guys in there, those guys were able to hold, but they're getting out of their gaps. So if A&M on the defensive line with the amount of talent that they have takes a step forward and plays disciplined football, stays in their gaps, stays in their rushing lanes against the passer, this team should be a lot better, even with the concerns at linebacker.
Is that just a maturity part of a defensive lineman going, hey, I used to be able to do whatever I wanted to just dominate this game, and it's learning how to play within the scheme rather than just try to go superstar it every time?
It's a big part of it. And again, like those young guys weren't getting blown off the ball. Like that's one issue. And that can be fixed by maturity as far as in the weight room. What I saw was a team that maybe tried to make plays a little too much. You're constantly throwing your head in the wrong gap early, trying to keep a guy from getting to the next level. Instead, you kind of have to trust the guys behind you. Sometimes a running back may not make the right read and runs into you, but a lot of times you're going to depend on the linebacker to scrape off of you and make a play. As a defensive lineman, it's not necessarily your job to make every tackle. A lot of times it's your job to put the guys behind you in the right position to make the play and not muddy the picture for them, right? You're trying to create this clear picture so that the linebackers know which gap they're fitting. If you're constantly throwing into other gaps early, the linebacker isn't able to see the correct picture. And I think that you're right in that it's a disciplinary issue that comes with guys who are used to being able to make all the plays. And kind of depended on to make all the plays right at the high school level. Whereas when you get to the college level, you're much more of a cog in the machine in that you need to play assignment football in order to give your team a chance to win. And it's kind of it's definitely an adjustment for guys. So I think that one more year in the system allows them to adjust to that way of thinking a little bit more.
It kind of reminds me of that, like, a bull and its son is kind of looking over a field of heifers, and the cow, like the young one, goes, "Hey, Dad, let's run down there and fuck one of those cows." And the dad goes, "Well, let's just walk down there and fuck them all." You know what I mean? And like that, like, do your job. Like just do your job. You don't have to go do every single thing all of the time. Do you think this is more like, is there anything Durkin needs to do schematically different, or is it just like execute what we're trying to do and that's enough?
I would like to see a little bit of that FTS philosophy from Bobby Petrino on the defensive side of the ball. But instead of, feeding the studs, you're getting the studs on the field. Know where you're strongest on the defensive line and get those guys in a position to make plays. I would like to see, in that vein, more four-man fronts just so that you have your best players on the field. Because I think when you look at this defensive line, the strength of it is on the interior. So if you're playing a three-man front with one interior defensive lineman, and then Fadil Diggs and Shamar Turner at the defensive ends, I think you're taking away, because like I want to have McKinley Jackson and Walter Nolan on the field at all times if I can. Those two together are just a real problem for any defensive or any offensive line. And I mean, again, like with Walter Nolan slumming up, maybe he slides out to that defensive end spot in a three-man front. But for my money, I would just rather see a four-man front with Diggs and Turner at the ends, and then McKinley Jackson at nose and Walter Nolan at three. personally, that's what I would love to see. And I just don't think we saw a ton of 4-man fronts last year. And I think it was kind of detrimental to A&M, but I also don't know if the guys were ready to play as much 4-down defensive lineman last year.
Going to put you on the spot. Who do you have, before we move to the second level, who do you have being the leading sacker for A&M this year?
So this is an interesting one, right? Because it's something that A&M struggled with last year. Fadil Diggs flashed a lot, and I think he has the ability to be a playmaker as far as rushing the passer. So the easy bet is on Fadil Diggs, but I really think that Malik Silla with his length and speed and bend, even if he isn't getting all of the snaps, I think he'll get in on obvious passing downs a bit and be the guy that A&M looks to pressure the passer. So as a dark horse candidate, I will have Malik Silla as a sack leader.
I like it. Katy native, maybe a Houston homer pick right there. We'll have to check the tape.
Well, I'm a DFW guy originally.
Not anymore though. When did you trade in that card?
I don't know. Probably when I realized the food in Houston's way better.
Yeah. The only thing worse in Houston is the humidity. Everything else is better. I'm not a big DFW guy. That's for a different show, but I'm just not a huge DFW guy. Some of that goes back.
Partial to Fort Worth versus Dallas as well.
Yeah, Fort Worth's fine. I guess it's the D and the DFW. Honestly, mine goes back to being a high school reporter, and I feel like DFW media and like the whole like DFW high school hype train just claims every single high school that's good at football if it's within 1,000 miles of DFW. Like all of a sudden Brock became a DFW school when they started winning state football championships. It's like, do y'all know how far Brock is out there? You know what I mean? Like Denton, I don't know. It just seems DFW is as big as they want it to be, and it kills me on the high school football side.
Understandable.
Yeah. That's a random rant there. Okay, move it. Let's go to secondary next, because I feel like linebacker is probably the bigger discussion. The safety position seems beyond loaded, right? I mean, Damani Richardson, Harding Gilbert's going to be really good. Like all those guys are going to be really good. I think Bryce Anderson's going to be a superstar. Antonio Johnson's a hard guy to replace, obviously. But I think Bryce Anderson's going to be good and kind of offer something maybe a little bit different than Johnson did at that nickel spot, able to play
better coverage guy,
just a little bit more athletic. I think just kind of like a freer football player. He's going to be good against the run. I think Bryce Anderson's going to be really, really good. Is there a concern for you at all within that secondary? I mean, this is a group that led the nation in pass defense last year. Do you think they're going to be as good this year, or is there's some concerns at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about the corner position, but not really that much. It just feels like safety is so solid that there's no concerns there. So if I'm nitpicking, the corner, just kind of curious to see who steps up there. Tariq Chappelle is obviously going to be one starter, but we'll see if there's going to be like more of a rotation at corner with the guys that have been brought in, like Josh Berry, Tony Grimes, and Sam McCall. That's a lot of talent in the transfer portal that they gained. But if there is a question, it's still at corner. With that being said, I'm not really worried about the secondary.
Yeah, I mean, Javon Thomas has been a name that's been mentioned by some of the reporters who've been on the ground and watched some of the open practices and stuff. Freshman that's going to have some playing time too. I think we all kind of just assumed Tony Grimes would be that other guy. And it doesn't seem like that's going to be true. It seems like he's going to play some nickel. I always kind of thought, I think we've talked about this on the show, like he's probably more of a safety body than a corner, so maybe they get kind of, interesting there at nickel with Bryce Anderson and what they do. But yeah, corner opposite of Chappelle seems to be the only question mark, but there's so much talent in that secondary room. You just assume that they're going to figure that out. I think getting after the quarterback is going to be the thing that helps that secondary out the most. So let's get to it. Let's get to the real defensive discussion. Linebacker, like how much of a step forward does that group need to make in 2023 for this team? Because to me, that was where the running issues really were. And some of that may be a defensive line getting out of the gap, but just as a layman watching A&M defense is like, oh, they just don't have a second level. Like, I don't even know where they are.
Yeah. It's definitely the impetus of the run defense, I think, is on this linebacking crew. The talent's there. I think Russell and Cooper are both talented guys. The depth is not there, right? So if either Cooper or Russell go down, you turn to a true freshman to step up in a hurry because Tarion York is going to be that guy and I think he's going to be an excellent player. But again, I don't necessarily want to see a true freshman thrown right into the fire. So I'm expecting a step up, but again, this hinges on health. We'll see how it shakes out. Obviously, would have liked to keep some of those transfers in the program for a depth aspect. Andre White, I think, is the big loss there from a depth perspective. But I am reluctantly saying that this linebacking crew will take a step forward.
Yeah, I mean, Durante Davis is the transfer from Jackson State, who, it's a pretty solid player. You just don't know how that kind of translate, what that jump is going to do to him. You know what? A name that I don't hear as much that I thought I'd start him is Martrell Harris. I thought, just as a guy who's kind of like in that gap between young guy and experienced guy, maybe he'd take a step forward. This doesn't have to be just a Harris conversation because I don't want to pick on him. But in general, how many years into college football do you know what that guy is yet? Is there do you know what I mean? Like if a guy is who he is in year 3, like, is that just who he's going to be forever? Or are there an opportunity to really take a step forward multiple years into your college career?
I think that there is a step, like an opportunity to take a step forward multiple years into your college career because you're still so young, right?
Yeah.
Like your third year of college football, you may only be 20 years old, 19 years old. So there's still a lot of development going on physically and a lot of development going on mentally.
Sure.
Like you may all of a sudden have something click and see the game in a completely different light.
Or start taking it seriously in a way that you didn't before, your body or something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe you make diet adjustments. Maybe you discover something that was kind of holding you back in the kitchen as much as on the field, right? Mm-hmm. There are any number of things that can allow people to take a step forward later in their career. And, maybe it's more time in the film room, right? I mean, I'm reluctant to give up on any of these guys just because it's very early in your life. And you're still going to get like the best as far as, weight room, knowledge, nutritional knowledge. And if it may take some time to just get like unlock all those things that could be holding you back, but yeah, I think guys can take a step forward 3-4 years into their career. I mean, you look at a guy who was just drafted from Texas Tech, right? Started at A&M and didn't get a lot of playing time, ended up transferring out, and all of a sudden, the name's slipping me right now.
Tyree Wilson.
Obviously the physical tools are there, but didn't really put it together at A&M. And then all of a sudden at Texas Tech, he becomes just a real issue for opposing offensive lines. All it takes is getting in the right scenario. And obviously that's an example where a guy transferred out, but I think that can happen within a program as well. So to answer that question, maybe we do see him get out on the field and take a step forward. That can be an aspect of it too. Sometimes getting thrown into the fire makes you step up.
Yeah, I think they're like, and this is the fault of the media, not the player or anything, but I think guys get kind of lost in like a purgatory between, we talk about the returning starters and then those exciting new faces that we think may emerge into the scene. And we forget about those guys kind of laying in the wings that have been there for a couple of years, that are maturing, that, maybe not get as much run. If they can have somebody just come out, like not out of nowhere, but if Harris can be a reliable third option and take some of that off of a York, to be as good, or if Davis can be a solid transfer in, that can be a serviceable player. But I'm with you. I mean, Torian's probably the most talented guy beyond those front two, and he's going to play a lot. He looked great in spring, so we'll see how he does there. So defensively, I think year 2 under overall, I think year 2 under Durkin is going to win out. And then there's just so much talent. To me, there's just so much talent there that they have to be good.
Yeah.
Like I'm not smart enough to tell you why and to break it, but like, I mean, I've gone to practice. Like you look around, you're like, oh my God, it looks like Georgia or Alabama or something, like, shut people out. Like they as good as a modern defense can be, because what is that? Like you're not going to hold teams to 13 points anymore. But they should be a very fun defense that creates turnovers, has sacks, and makes more plays than they did last year.
Yep. And again, that turnover battle too is going to be a big part of it. If A&M can win the turnover battle, I think you'll see this team surprise a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that comes down to closing, like you said. Come up with a couple extra sacks a game that you were a step away from getting. Get one or two more fumbles. Get a couple more interceptions with like a Bryce Anderson, making some plays back there. And then all of a sudden that offense converts those. And now, those are the fine margins that take you from 5-7 to 10-2, like an LSU did under Brian Kelly last year. Before we move on to kind of the season overview stuff, anything to talk about with special teams? Like I'm not smart enough. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and lie to anybody.
Yeah,
I know punting's going to be good.
Constantino's going to be good. Randy Bond was pretty solid there at the end of the year. Between those two things, I think A&M will be all right as long as A&M honestly kind of has a reputation for producing specialists, right? All the way back to like Shane Leckler. The punter position's always been pretty good at A&M. So as far as special teams go, I think we'll see. I'm interested to see who's going to be returning kicks now that Devon Achane has graduated, but I think there's going to be some weapons back. There's no shortage of weapons, right? A lot of guys that can make plays. So I'm excited to see how special team shakes out this year.
Yeah, I mean, I would think kick returns, Ruben Owens is pretty high up on that list. Maybe punt returns more of a Moose Muhammad or an Evan Stewart or something like that. But yeah, I would see Owens as a kick returner pretty quickly. He was excellent at that as well at the high school level.
Anaya Smith was punt returner, but I can't help but wonder if
I would protect him. Yeah, I'd protect him. Maybe big games, right? You're playing against Alabama. You think you're in a good spot to get a return off or something because you got him pinned deep or whatever, but I just wouldn't have him standing back there to stand back there unless you had to. Quickly on third down, let's kind of just go through the schedule real quick. I'll kind of go through the schedule. Well, I'll say the name. You say win, I'll say win or loss or whatever. And if we disagree on one, we'll stop and talk about it a little bit more. First week, and we'll talk about this more next week in depth, obviously, in each week. We'll concentrate a lot on what game they're playing that upcoming weekend. But New Mexico to start this one off, Kyle Field, September 2nd, 6 p.m. Win.
Should be a win.
At Miami.
Win. But I have this as one of the key games of the season.
Yeah, for me, we talked about that. We did a last week. If you want to go back and kind of listen to like a season real schedule breakdown, kind of went through more of the schedule and what we're going to do. Or no, that was 2 weeks ago. Last week was the SEC preview. But at Miami, I think we were talking about was maybe going to be the thing that makes or breaks this year. I know week 2, and maybe that's prisoner of the moment stuff. But if you tell me they beat Miami, they're on track to have a turnaround season. They're still on that track, right? If they lose to Miami, all of a sudden, some alarm bells are going to go off, and now 10-2, 9-3 seems a lot harder to get there. So that Miami almost feels like a must win. Louisiana Monroe, obviously that's going to be a win there. It starts getting interesting probably around Auburn, right? Week 4, what is the Hugh Freeze going to look like? I'll still go win there.
I'll go win. If it was later in the season, I'd be a little bit more worried about it.
If they had a quarterback in Auburn, I'd be a little bit more worried about it. I hear the NIL in Auburn is good. I don't know how the hell they didn't get somebody from the Ole Miss has got like 4 quarterbacks with real starting experience. Auburn's just taking whoever they can field. Arkansas, Southwest Classic in Arlington, always a weird ass game, but I'll take A&M there as well.
Yeah, this is going to be a win that takes 5 years off of my life.
Yeah, maybe KJ Jefferson doesn't jump from the 6-yard line and makes that one a little bit more difficult this year. But that game is always like really weird banana pants stuff there. Enjoy that one. I hope that when they go 3-6, I know it probably isn't going to last. I hope the A&M Arkansas thing sticks because that's a great. I would go Arkansas, LSU, Texas, but I don't think that's how that's going to break out if it does that.
Yeah, I'd like to keep the game and go to Fayetteville and get out of Jerry World. But again, I'm like you. I just don't have faith that's how things are going to shake out.
I think LSU and Texas will be guaranteed. I think Arkansas will be the sacrifice, and that's unfortunate. Alabama, week 6, a big one. I will be at that one. Already got my credential approved today. So we're in business there. I'm going loss. I don't know what Alabama is this year, but I'm not going to get caught on an August 21st recording saying A&M is going to beat Alabama. I think they can beat Alabama, but I can't predict them to do it.
Yeah, nor am I going to be that guy, especially, I think we've already talked about it on this show, but Nick Saban smiling in press conferences is a terrifying thought. I'm going a loss to Alabama as well. I will also plan on being there for that one.
I am a big believer in fading the public, and right now it feels like people are jumping on the Nick Saban bandwagon is dying. Like the end of the run is over. Kirby Smart's the king of college football, and that scares the hell out of me. Like that is when Nick Saban is at his scariest, and so like Alabama 12-0 is incoming, in my opinion. Like yeah, I would not be surprised at all. I don't know what they are at quarterback, but they're not gonna go like 8-4. You know, like people are acting like Alabama's done or something. It's just asinine. It's insane. At Tennessee the next week. I think this one's one of those weird toss-up games, but I'm going to go loss just because that's a hard place to play.
Yeah. This has been one that I flipped and flopped on quite a bit. I now have it as a win, but I am very reluctant in saying that just because I don't think A&M is going to lose 2 in a row. I think it's more that A&M gets the loss against Alabama, bounces back with a win against Tennessee.
South Carolina at home.
I have that as a win. Beamer is one of those guys that scares me as a coach. I think he's a very intelligent guy and will have a good game plan, but they lost a lot in the portal.
Yeah.
And I just think A&M should be able to out talent them at home.
Yeah, I think South Carolina could be a surprise in the East. You know, if there can be a surprise, I mean, Georgia's going to win the East, but like in terms of like who's going to be number 2, I wouldn't be surprised if South Carolina made a little bit of a push there. But if this was on the road, I'd worry about it a little bit more. But you're right, they lost a lot of talent. A&M is just going to be the more talented team, especially in the trenches, so they should be able to win that football game. November 4th at Ole Miss. If I could go to an away game this year, I think this is the one I would pick. I think this is going to be a fantastic football game. I'm going to take Ole Miss since they're at home.
I have Ole Miss in this one as well. I think this is my second loss that I have on A&M's record. Oxford's going to be a tough place to play. I think if A&M has like one hope, it's that the quarterback room at Ole Miss kind of implodes. But you talk about best players in the SEC, and Quinshon Judkins has to be at or near the top of that list. I mean, I think he's just an incredible athlete, and he's going to make up for a lot of the issues that Ole Miss has offensively.
Mississippi State going to win.
I am going to win against Mississippi State. Mississippi State's kind of one of those programs that has been a thorn in A&M side since A&M came to the SEC, but I think A&M will be able to out talent Mississippi State again, especially at home and with another year under their belt to kind of adjust to what Mississippi State does.
The Week 12 FCS punt game against Abilene Christian. We'll go win there.
Yeah, I think I'll go. I think I'll go with a win there.
Yeah, that's my least favorite thing about the SEC is just this random like at the end of the year bye week against an FCS opponent thing.
I personally loved it when I was playing, but
I bet you did. Yeah. I understand. If I was an A&M fan, I'd love it too. Right? You get that win. It's kind of a bye week. You get to rest up for that big game the next week at LSU to finish out the season.
Yeah, and I have this one as a loss as well. You're going into Baton Rouge. And Death Valley is one of the toughest places to play on the planet in any sport. So I think, LSU fans chanting Tiger Bait is right up there with like Americans going into a fight in Brazil in like MMA and the crowd's chanting "Oop, vai morrer" at you, which means you're going to die in Portuguese. Those two environments to me are very similar. So
that's a big compliment. Like that's a major compliment right there. I mean, I think I have them losing this as well. I think, for me, I've always kind of gone back and forth between 8-4 and 10-2, like landing somewhere in between there. I think Alabama at home, at LSU feel like the obvious losses on the schedule, or maybe not obvious, but like the ones that are most likely. Yeah. And then for me, it becomes at Tennessee and at Ole Miss, or the swing for the Aggies, along with that at Miami game early on. Like those 3 road games, Miami, Tennessee, Ole Miss, are for me the difference between 10-2 and 7-5, and also for me the difference between Jimbo Fisher being the head coach in 2024 and Jimbo Fisher not being the head coach in 2024.
Yeah, and my final record prediction is 9-3 with those losses to Alabama, Ole Miss, and LSU. But I'm like you, Ole Miss and Tennessee feel like the biggest if games. LSU and Alabama feel like the most likely losses. There's a few other kind of sneaky ones in there. South Carolina and Auburn, I think, come to mind as far as home games that could be a little bit tricky. And then Arkansas is always the Arkansas game. So that one's kind of scary too. But I have A&M at 9-3 as of right now. And I'm sure that will change even between now and next week.
All right, we'll check back in next week to keep Jay Arnold's. I think I've gotten a final record prediction from you every single podcast, so we're going to continue that one. And before we get out of here, let's do fourth down. Let's talk a little bit about what we're doing this year. I know we both have some things we're excited about. Where are you going this year? What are your kind of play? I guess first, what A&M games are you going to get to? And then after that, kind of what are your side trips going to be?
Yeah, so right now I only have 2 A&M games penciled in, or actually 3. Let me take that back. I have 3 A&M games penciled in. Alabama at Texas A&M is the first one that I have penciled in. That could change. Texas A&M at Tennessee. So I will be making the trip up to Knoxville,
Nice.
to Neyland Stadium. Pretty excited about that one.
Have you ever been to the Smoky Mountain National Park?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I drove through Knoxville on the way to Richmond,
Okay.
but I went in from the North Carolina side when I did it in 2020 in the fall. Saw
Because that's only about an hour from Knoxville. You just go south through Gatlinburg and stuff.
Gatlinburg and Sevierville and all that up there. But it's it's gorgeous part of the country.
Beautiful part of it. That's going to be a great time of year to be there.
Yeah, I am trying to convince my parents because they're making the trip and kind of easing the cost of this a little bit, which is nice. That we need to do a little bit of foliage looking in Smoky Mountain National Park while we're up there.
No doubt.
And then A&M at LSU is the last A&M game that I have penciled in. It's kind of a tradition now. We go there Thanksgiving weekend because it's on a Saturday, and we have that Thursday and Friday off anyway. So I'll be making the trip down there to Baton Rouge, the #1 tailgate destination in America. Baton Rouge for a Tigers game day, in my opinion.
That's pretty epic, man. If you're going to go to 3 games on the Aggie schedule this year, home against Alabama, at Tennessee, at LSU is probably the top 3 draft picks. I mean, at Ole Miss would be up there as well, just because their pre-game facilities. And I love the Lane Kiffin, Jimbo Fisher kind of shtick, like wrestling thing that they got going on.
Yeah.
And so that would be a lot of fun. But yeah, those are pretty epic trips right there. That's going to be exciting here. I know you're doing other stuff too. So what else you got going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, with that A&M schedule, I have Kyle Field, Neyland Stadium, and Death Valley, 3 of the top venues in college football.
Yeah.
I'm getting a 4th one in September next month. About this time, I will be at Iowa at Penn State for the whiteout, which I am absolutely pumped for as a college football fan. That's probably the biggest game on my slate outside of the A&M games. I have some other September games too. I'm planning to be at UTSA at Houston to start off.
Let's go. Meet. We're gonna beat Houston. By the way, I can say we on this podcast because it's not it's an Aggie podcast. UTSA gonna knock off Houston.
Yeah. Then I have a hunting trip the weekend after that. But then I'm planning to go to Austin for Wyoming at Texas. I am a Wyoming fan. 7220. The elevation of Laramie. I don't know if anybody knew that, but it is the highest FBS stadium. Of course, they're not playing in Wyoming.
I would say Boulder. Texas, I would say Colorado is the highest FBS stadium at all.
Well, sorry. Yeah. That's a fair point. I just mean by geographical elevation.
Sure.
But yeah, Wyoming at Texas is on the schedule for me. Love getting over to Austin anytime I can. October brings me to the Sinjay away trip, which we've talked about. The people of the internet elected to send me to Fort Lewis at South Dakota School of the Mines and Technology in Rapid City, South Dakota, October 21st. So I will be there. If you pull up their stadium, O'Hara Stadium in Rapid City, you'll notice that it's a very unique design where you can tailgate from your car at the game on a terrace overlooking the stadium. It's pretty cool. I'm gonna go see your Roadrunners again in November at UNT.
I'll be at that one as well. Yeah, I'll be.
That'll
be
a fun one. All right, that's perfect. That works out really well. I've already mentioned that I have A&M at LSU for rivalry week in Baton Rouge. I may try to squeeze in an Egg Bowl trip for Thanksgiving that same weekend and see if I can't do the double there.
I love it. I love what that's pretty nice. That's a jam-packed and exciting college football season right there.
Yeah. I'm super pumped about the whiteout, super pumped about the uniqueness of the South Dakota Mines game. The Egg Bowl is tentative right now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk my job into that, but that could be a fun one as well. And then obviously all the A&M games are going to be great.
That is going to be a good one. I'm excited to watch that. I'm a little jealous of some of those trips. As somebody, I always stay in the state. I kind of like that's kind of the job. We've talked about this, I think, before on the podcast as well. When I took the job, I guess in my head, I just made this idea that I needed to stay in Texas, but I don't think that's true. Like, I think my job would allow me to like go to Tuscaloosa if I wanted to, because it's probably the same cost as it is to like go to Lubbock or something. But I just feel like so Texas centric that I went to the Fiesta Bowl and I went to the national championship game, but like week 2, A&M's at Miami, Texas is at Tuscaloosa, but I'm going to be at Oregon, Texas Tech, because like that's in the state and I feel like that's where I should be or whatever. I don't know. That's just kind of how I've interpreted the job in my head. And I don't know if that's a true interpretation or not.
Which to be fair, Oregon at Texas Tech should be a fun one.
Oh yeah, I'm excited.
What I would do early in the season is I would try to find the climate that would be a little bit more a little bit nicer to me in early September when some of those games are hot.
Yeah, I should have gone to El Paso first. There's no humidity in El Paso. I think everybody thinks of El Paso as like the desert, so it must be hot. It is not as hot as it is in Dallas or Houston or Austin as it is in El Paso. One, because of the humidity, and two, because of the desert nights. Like it drops down enough to where it gives you a little bit of a reprieve from the heat overnight. I am pretty excited about what I'm doing in 2023. At Dave Gamble's Texas Football and Texas Monthly, we're going to partner together and write a coffee book of the ultimate Texas college football ultimate guide. We haven't come up with a name yet, but there's 13 FBS teams in the state of Texas now. There's 13 weeks in the college football season. So your boy, that's me, is going to go to a different FBS stadium in the state each week. Right. So, and then correspondingly, the book will be that chapter. So like week 1, I'll be at Colorado at TCU. So that means the first chapter will be about TCU, like the 5 best teams in their history, the 5 best coaches in their history, 5 best players in the history, restaurants around the stadium, right? Like all that kind of everything, notable alumni from that school and stuff, and try to do different chapters for each one. I won't go through the whole schedule because it's 13 weeks, but I just want to brag about what my first 6 weeks are going to be. This I think is pretty solid. Week 1, TCU, Colorado, right? Deion Sanders, like his first game as a Power 5 head coach. That's going to be a zoo. I think the Horned Frogs are going to put 70 on them, but still, it's going to be fun to be there. I'm excited to see how the national guys spin their article, like what because I don't think the game's going to be good, but like everybody's article is going to be pretty good. So we're going to see how everybody writes about Deion Sanders there. Week 2, I'll be at Oregon at Tech. That's going to be sold out, AT&T Jones. And outside of Kyle Field, give me Jones Stadium in Lubbock at night with a sellout over any other venue in the state of Texas. I think Kyle Field, number one, there's so many people. Just that's its own category. Texas has a lot of people as well. It's just not the same. Lubbock at night. Maybe it's because I was at the Crabtree catch game, and that's like my endearing view of what Lubbock is at night. But those people in West Texas show the F up, and I love going to big games in Lubbock.
I will say that like my second favorite venue, at least from like a visually pleasing perspective, has got to be the Sun Bowl.
Oh
in El Paso. Obviously, the environment, the college football environment, probably not there, but it is interesting to hear. Like, when Texas Tech is good, I can see Lubbock being a place that is fun to take in a game at night.
Yeah, especially at night. They start throwing tortillas. Everybody's dressed in black. Like it really is a unique, awesome college football experience that's very underrated. When they're not very good, and there's been a lot of years where they haven't been, obviously it loses that luster. But I think Big Fox News or Sports Sun, whatever the hell they call that stupid show, is going to be there on Saturday. It's going to be sold out against Oregon. McGuire's got them fired up. I think they're like the dark horse in the Big 12, but I don't even know if they're the dark horse anymore because everybody's talking about them so much. So we'll see about that. Week 3, I will be at TCU at Houston. That's the first Houston Big 12 game. Sonny Dykes, Dana Holgerson, thick as thieves. They're like best friends, so that'll be fun. Week 4, Texas at Baylor. Last time Texas is going to Waco, maybe forever. I don't know. The CDC, the athletic director for Texas, keeps saying that they are going to play these Texas teams again, but I don't believe them. And if they do, they're not going to go on the road for it, so maybe we get a Baylor versus Texas in Austin, but it'll be a long time before the Longhorns are back in Waco. Week 5, you'll like this one. Maybe I can talk you to get into this one as well. Jack State at Sam Houston. The first true home game for Sam Houston as an FBS team doesn't happen until week 5.
And is that game during the week?
Yeah, Wednesday night.
I think you can talk me into it.
Wednesday night.
I'm in. I'll say it right now. I'm in.
First FBS home game, first Conference USA game ever for Sam Houston. They play one home game before that, but it's at NRG, so it's not really like in Huntsville. So I'm super interested in how this goes. One of the reasons is like I don't even know where they're going to put the media. Like I have no idea. Like I don't know if anybody's just been to Bauer Stadium, but it looks like a high school stadium, like it just does. Like they have a lot of ways to go at Sam Houston before that stadium is ready. They're working on the money and stuff. It'll get good, but right now it is not, and I'm very interested to see how that goes. But I have to be there for that. And then week 6, A&M, Alabama. I missed the last one because A&M had lost a game, and so I was like, well, I'll go to Texas OU. Right. I think both of those teams were undefeated. A&M had just lost. And so it was like, well, they're going to lose to Alabama as well. So I'll just go to OU Texas. I won't try to do the doubleheader. And then the Texas OU game, that was when Caleb Williams led that comeback against Texas and stuff. So it was a good game. And then I got home just in time to watch A&M beat Alabama at home. And just like, I could have been in Kyle Field watching that game, and I was not. So that's one of my bigger regrets.
I love a video of the kid that rushed the field at both places.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
Like, that could have been you.
That could have been me. Yeah. I mean, I don't run very much anymore. You're not going to see me rush anywhere, really. Like even in my car, I'm not really in a rush. But yeah, I could have been at both, and I wasn't because I just assumed that Alabama was going to win. And that was a great lesson to relearn, right? Like every now and then you just need to be humbled and realize that college football is awesome. And as soon as you think you know something, you don't know shit. And so I say that as we just did a preview episode. I waited until the end, so everybody listened before we admitted that we don't know what the hell we're talking about. We're guessing just like everybody else.
Yeah, it's college football is like the old Rowdy Roddy Piper quote. Just when they think they have all the answers, I change the questions.
That's exactly right. Who was your favorite wrestler growing up?
So I was a big fan of Rey Mysterio.
Nice.
Even
still
though
wrestling.
He's still wrestling. Even though obviously I can't do any of like the high flyer stuff. And I probably should have picked like a bigger guy as the guy. Like I just loved Rey Mysterio. He was a giant killer. Like who doesn't love the underdog? And like his title run, in the WWE is still one of my favorite moments. I mean, just obviously not his run necessarily, but winning the Royal Rumble and then the title was just a really cool set of circumstances.
I was a Piper, Flair, Razor Ramon guy. I always liked the heels. I always liked the trash talkers on the microphone that like made fun of the crowds. Like I'm a big MJF guy now for people who still watch wrestling, like dudes that just go and cut diss tracks and just like get the crowd riled up and make fun of the baby face and stuff. I always hated Hulk Hogan. And I think that opinion that I was a good judge of character early, because now it's like cool to hate Hulk Hogan for like real reasons. But I just remember even being a kid and just being like, this is so phony. This is so dumb. Like this dude's not really eating vitamins to get that big or whatever. Like he's, and so anyway, I still love professional wrestling. But I am so glad that college football is here, folks. Like we don't have another weekend without football until January, or really until if we count the NFL. Until like mid-February. So going to be an exciting time on the college football. You excited for anything week 0? You got anything locked in for week 0? Or are you going to use it for one more free weekend? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so I'm probably going to be moving stuff during week 0, unfortunately. I mean, the good news is that I have until like the end of the month to get all my stuff out of my apartment. So I have a little bit of time, but I'm probably going to be using week 0 mostly as a moving week. I will say I am excited to see Jacksonville State UTEP. I think that's going to be a fun little way to kick off Jacksonville State's time in FBS, and I think it could be interesting to see what UTEP does this year too. So that's probably the game that I have kind of circled as one that I want to at least sit down to the TV and watch.
I will be locked into UTEP. Go to texasfootball.com if you want a post-game description up there. I'll probably come up with like a 3 things we learn or some kind of thing like that. Watch it. But yeah, they're the only team in the state playing, so I get to kind of just watch the minors. I love UTEP. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm kind of like a honk for UTEP randomly, even though I went to UTSA and don't have any affiliation to El Paso. I would move there. Like if I could live in any big city in this state and make as much money as I need to like live the life that I live or whatever, because you can't ever go backwards. That's what sucks. Like when I first got into this business, I think I made 27.5 as a sports editor at the Taylor Daily Press and the Hutto News, but I couldn't make 27.5 again. And so like I don't know how I can get back to UTEP or El Paso as a full-time job, but I love it out there. And I am excited to see how UTEP handles Conference USA that is more manageable now for them than maybe it was in the past. A little bit more even. You know, Liberty's got more money than everybody, but outside of that, pretty even. So happy college football return on Saturday for week 0. Soak it in. I think a lot of times we get lost in this like, oh, well, this game doesn't matter and that game doesn't matter and those two teams stick. Who cares? We get 13 weeks of this shit. Like, it's not a long thing. Like, we don't get 162 games or anything like that. We complain for 8 months about how we miss football, and then we complain that we don't have any big games in week 0. It's like, yes, we do. Go watch the football games. If you like football, go watch a high school game. Get out there and go watch a local high school game. I'm going to be at Dripping Springs Vandergrift on Friday to get out there and go watch some recruits and stuff like that. So football is back. My mood is improved. And Jay Arnold is back in the heat and moving and getting his penance from taking a week vacation into the mountains. So everything is right with the world. We will be back next week to preview. This is going to sound crazy. Week 1 of Texas A&M's football schedule.
Crazy.
Good times. Talk to you next week for Aggie War Pod and for Dave Campbell's Texas Football Republic Football Network. Peace.